Ali is a software engineer and cybersecurity researcher whose technology has been adopted in a variety of areas, from transportation systems to critical internet infrastructure, including being built into products by Apple and Google. He earned his PhD in cryptography after studying for a computer science master's degree aged 17. Aged 23, Junade earned chartered engineer status, the terminal regulatory status for engineers in the UK, and last year, aged 27, he became a fellow of the Institution of Engineering and Technology, the youngest ever fellow of a professional engineering institution on record. Dr. Ali joins me today to discuss the business of cybersecurity. Welcome to Connections Radio, Dr. Ali, and thank you for joining me today. Can you please start by telling me what first sparked your interest in this sector?
Yes, definitely. So I've always had an interest in computers for a long while since a young age, and I think I think it was quite interesting. I think early on, just not just being able to build things with computers, but also being able to understand, I guess, where their problems are and how people are able to exploit that for both good purposes and also less than good ends as well.
Naughty purposes too. Tell me about the technology you developed that has been adopted in so many areas and by companies such as Apple and Google. I mean, that must have been quite good for your career.
Yeah, so there's been quite a few things I've been lucky enough over my career to be able to play a role in. I think one of the things which was kind of in the news quite recently was came off the back of some research which was actually put out by the Institution of Engineering and Technology that only 1 in 5 people in the UK can identify a secure password over one which has already been in a data breach. I actually invented the technology which allows web browsers and mobile phones and password managers and websites to tell people if their password has already been in a data breach. And so that's something which helps encourage people to use more secure practices, use passwords which aren't in data breaches, and adopt practices like two-factor authentication.
So that was something I was going to ask you a little bit later about two-factor authentication. How good is it at keeping out cyber attacks? Should we all be adopting it wherever possible?
Yeah, so when we think about authentication, or when we log into something, there's really kind of 3 ways that a website can know that we are who we say we are, and that's something we know. So something like a password, something we have. So that could be something like a authenticated device or something like that. And or it can be something we are, so something like if it's biometrics, it could be a fingerprint or a facial scan if we think about fingerprint recognitions on mobile devices. So really the advantage of two-factor authentication is it isn't just something you know, like a password, but it also is something you have. So it's a code generated from a phone or something like that. And I think this is something which is hugely effective at addressing a lot of those cyber attacks that we see in the world at the moment, and it's something which can massively reduce people's risks. So alongside using secure passwords, using two-factor authentication can definitely be quite important. The one thing which is quite interesting at the moment is definitely when people are using this, often they get pushed to use something like getting codes over text message. If you have a choice, it's generally more secure to generate them from an app. And that's another misconception we actually saw in the research that was done by the Institution of Engineering and Technology, that a majority seem to think that actually text messages were more secure, but there's various security issues with that. People are able to, for instance, hijack phone numbers, or they're able to steal SIM cards out of phones if they don't have a pin on the actual SIM card. And we've seen attacks like that. So generally, the app-based solutions are the more secure of the two options.
Okay, and how bad is the technological landscape right now for cybercrime? Where are we with cybercrime? How fastly are they developing ways to get into things like two-factor authentication? Is that what they're working on essentially?
Yeah, so I think, as you mentioned, we can't really understand cybersecurity without discussing cybercrime. And if we think about the landscape of cybercrime, as more and more of our physical worlds have moved online, what we've seen is we've seen this, we've essentially seen that every kind of or pretty much every kind of crime you can imagine has also developed a kind of cyber dimension. So both crimes which are financial and non-financial, and even the two where the physical and kind of cyber worlds interact with each other, we definitely see often cyber elements to crimes which are often purely would traditionally be purely in the physical realm. So definitely it's something which we've seen ramp up dramatically. I think when we look at the this landscape, there are things which are where there are crimes of opportunity. So people who will attack accounts with weak passwords, leverage things like data breaches and things like that to attack as many people as possible. But then we also see kind of the more sophisticated targeted attacks, which target particular individuals for various reasons. And so we essentially see both ends of the spectrum. We see, yeah, crimes of opportunity done by organized crime groups, but then at the other side, we see what we call advanced persistent threat groups who can often be backed by state-sponsored hackers, things like this, and they will often they can often target individuals using very sophisticated techniques.
I liked your alluding to a sort of analogy here of imagine day to day, physical crime, in the real world, and then cyber crime. So what you're saying there makes me think the opportunists are kind of the pickpocketers on the street, and then the more considered, more sophisticated crime attacks are more like organized crime of robbing banks and things like that. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And I think the often advantage that the people who are doing the crimes of opportunity have in the cyber realm is that they're able to target many more people. They're able to, try and hack so many more people in a day than a pickpocketer can walk past in a day.
Yeah, and I'm interested. Do you know how much cybersecurity, cyber crime is actually worth? How much is money are they making off us through cyber
Yeah,
attacks?
so I think there's lots and lots of different estimates you end up reading from time to time, but it's something which is you're talking in the billions. It's an absolutely massive kind of risk, massive industry. And then also off the back of it, you see kind of the non-financial elements to this as well. So you see things which are also you know, um, not just threats to individuals, people's kind of sense of safety, things like that. But then you also see attacks which target things to do with critical national infrastructure or politically motivated attacks or attacks which are in furtherance to crimes against a person, things like that as well. So definitely it's massive in terms of the financial impact, but then there's also a lot of a significant non-financial component to this as well.
Mm, absolutely. And just going back to you for a moment, how does it feel to be the youngest fellow of a professional engineering institution?
Very proud, yes. It was a huge honor to be recognized by, yeah, such a distinguished institution as the IET. So definitely incredibly proud of that, and it's incredibly humbling.
Fantastic. And what are you currently working on, if you're allowed to say?
Yes, so kind of got a few different things I've been working on recently, both within cybersecurity and also a kind of more traditional engineering environment. So one of the things I spent the last few months working on was really around disasters, which are more instead of if you think of more instead of if you think of criminal acts, more kind of reliability issues in software, which lead to kind of fatal outcomes. So more to do with killer computers, which aren't necessarily motivated by criminal ends. So that's been something which has been top of mind over the last few months for me, and I think we've seen a lot of that type of stuff feed into the news recently, especially with payment outages affecting high street shops and banking outages and news around things like the Horizon IT scandal. And then also, as we kind of get into more towards, I think, the election seasons around the world, I think this has been where cybersecurity has been something which has been increasingly something which has been of concern. And then something else which has been kind of growing has also been AI and how that impacts people with the growth of generative AI, being able to make scam emails and target people with scam phone calls in a lot more convincing way. That's also been something which has been developing recently as well.
Leads into another thing I was going to ask you about deep fake. What exactly is it, and how much of a risk is it to potentially individuals, particularly sort of celebrities who are being essentially cloned? What do you think about deep fake, and how do we tackle it?
Yes, so this is something which is quite interesting. I think when it comes to deep fakes, what we essentially see is that they use a technology called generative AI, and generative AI is essentially where you use artificial intelligence to generate material. So for people who've used services like ChatGPT or those types of chatbots, you'll be interacting with something which uses generative AI, and this generative AI can also then be used to create deep fakes. So not just in terms of text, but also in terms of audio and in terms of video as well. So this can then be used to create quite convincing audio, so copy someone's voice, or it can also be used to create fake videos. And this essentially poses quite a severe risk. We see a kind of a few different things which have emerged. Definitely, people have already been using it for celebrities and deep fakes, which have targeted celebrities in some cases with explicit photographs, things like that. I think we saw an example was Taylor Swift a few months ago. And then we also see examples where they're used for things where we've seen people who've been scammed by someone impersonating the voice of, say, a CEO, or even I think in one case, someone joined a call and it was a fake conference with lots and lots of different employees, and that was used to create a scam. So it's definitely something which is quite severe, but I think this is one of those areas where the benefits of technology offer us a kind of solution. So there's technologies which are emerging where you can use things like something we call cryptographic proof of personhood, which is kind of how you can mathematically prove that someone is who you say they are. That's potentially one of the routes that could go down. So I think this is really one of those areas where it's important to see kind of the policymakers who are working on regulating this, working quite closely with the engineering profession to make sure that the things that are the solutions are both workable and technically sound.
And I think the AI platforms are also doing things like, do you want to admit this was written by AI? Like you can now, if you're using AI to do some writing for you, and you put written by AI. So they're trying to sort of encourage people to be honest about their use of AI. But it does frighten me, this deep fake stuff. But I like what you said. That comforts me that the technology is also being used to counteract the issues with it and recognize it. What are your top keep safe tips for the online public?
Yeah, so I think it's in terms of when it comes to cybersecurity, it's the basic hygiene stuff, which is often the most important. So keeping your device up to date. If you're buying something secondhand, make sure it's still receiving security updates. So security updates are something which is critical. Also, alongside that, making sure you have backups. So one of the other types of attacks we see is called ransomware, where someone will their contents of their computer will be encrypted, and they would be asked to pay a ransom, which may or may not actually decrypt their files. So keeping backups is something which is quite important. And then when it comes to your online accounts and password security, using a password which isn't in a data breach before. So a password manager can help you do this. generally longer is better when it comes to passwords. It's safer to use something like three random words from a dictionary than it is to have a short password, which may look very complex with letters and numbers, but might not actually be secure. So that's really critical. And again, password managers can help you make sure that you only need to remember one password. And then the other thing which can be quite beneficial, as we've discussed, is using two-factor authentication where that's available as well.
And that's now available on, is it available across the board on social media now, two-factor authentication? I'm sure I've investigated this on my own devices. Um, password keychains on Macs. Is it safe to put all your passwords in a keychain, or is that Mac going to be at risk of all the passwords being revealed? How sophisticated is that technology?
Yeah, so I think we've also I think seen Apple kind of come up recently with their own password manager quite recently. Personally, I use a third-party one, but I think the advice, which is I think quite important, especially for people who may have relatives who might not be as tech savvy, is even writing passwords down in a notebook is often more secure than just than trying to use the same password everywhere. So whatever helps works. There's obviously different degrees of security that come with that, but I'd say, even something like writing passwords down in a notebook can often be more secure because the physical threat for a lot of people is less than the attack than the risk they would face of using the same password for every website. But the ideal solution, what I tend to do is I personally use a third party password manager and use things like two-factor authentication and change passwords when they're in a data breach.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I remember back in the day, many years ago, the rule was, never write your passwords down. But now we've realized that actually, if your password book's going to get stolen, someone's got to break into your house, discover which book is your password book, and then take it. So yeah, the risks are not they're not the same as they used to be, perhaps, or they're not as difficult and risky as perhaps we thought they once were.
Definitely, yeah. And I actually went through a long process when I was kind of going through the process of changing the way the industry worked to moving towards it, things like encouraging people to change passwords when they've been in a data breach instead of using these long, complex password composition rules. There's a lot of work that went into both kind of making this technology accessible, but also going into the various communities that exist related to passwords and technical communities and kind of convincing them that this was the move in the right direction. There was a lot of scientific work which was done in order to create the empirical research that this was something that was worth doing. So it definitely took a while to get there, but I think the history of passwords is they've always been kind of this piecemeal approach where they were invented for something which is very, very different to how we use it nowadays. Much like lots of the technology we use, like the internet, for instance, is very much kind of this patchwork of standards because it came from a day where it was used for something which was very different. And over time, we try and kind of add layers on top of each other to make things more secure.
Where are we headed when it comes to technology? I mean, we're moving so fast. It feels like we're moving so fast. What do you predict for 5 years' time? We're all talking about Chat GPT, although that seems to be it's not as chatted about anymore. But what's next is what I'm asking.
Yeah, so I think we definitely live in interesting times. I think this is one of those things which is quite, I think, tough for many people to be able to predict. As you mentioned, there's a lot of hype around AI and ChatGPT recently. I think one of the things which has been a limiting factor in that has been the cost of computing resources. So the cost of the chips on computers, we call them GPUs, which are used to actually do a lot of this processing. That they've been something which has been quite expensive, and I think we're seeing definitely a lot of work there to try and reduce those costs, and that will probably be something which will help make AI a lot more accessible to a lot more people. we see advances, I think, in quite a lot of different areas, and I think one of the key things over the past few months has been with inflation rates being so high that often has a kind of stifling effect often on on the engineering world and technological advances. But I think at the same time, there's so many different areas where from cybersecurity and AI to right down in the physical technology where there's advances happening. An interesting thing which happened recently has been the UK government, for instance, has actually turned what was a voluntary code of conduct when it came to cybersecurity for IoT devices. So these pieces of technology like smart speakers we put in a very privileged position in our homes. They used to be used on large scale attacks, which didn't just pose a risk to the individuals and their privacy, but also to critical national infrastructure because they had a lot of a high power internet connection connected to them. And we've seen kind of improvements in cybersecurity there, and we've seen what was a voluntary code of conduct now become law as well. So that's been something else we've seen quite recently, and so we've definitely seen improvements there as well.
And I have to ask, does AI deserve the hype that is going on right now? Do you think it's as sophisticated as the general public seems to think it is, or are we still a way off?
Um, Yeah, so I think it kind of almost depends on the purpose of what it's used for in many ways. There's some work I did on this towards the end of last year around kind of giving AI the ability to do metacognition, so almost the ability to think about thinking, which is something which is quite closely related to this idea of consciousness that consciousness as we think about it in the human sense. But then again, the trouble associated with that was the computing resources available and the cost of being able to do that versus the benefit. So I think that that's something which has been a limiting factor. But also at the same time, when we think of AI, um, it is something which has, I think, had when I've done kind of market research with people into this, the market opportunities can often be not as vast as the hype that is associated with new technologies around it. So I think it's often the thing we tend to see with new technologies is there's this concept I think is called the Gartner hype cycle, which is you initially see technology hype kind of grow very rapidly, and people will have massively kind of overinflated expectations. And then things will kind of plateau, or things will kind of initially drop out, and people will be disengaged. But then you'll start to see kind of a plateau of realism around it, and people will have realistic expectations for the technology, and that's kind of the cycle you tend to see with most technologies. And I think it'll likely be true of AI as well.
That all sounds fascinating. Dr. Junade Ali, it's been great to talk to you today. Thank you for joining me on the business of cyber security. Where can people follow you online or even get in touch for more information about cybercrime?
Definitely, yes. So I think if people are interested in more to do with cybersecurity, there's lots of information which is at the Institution of Engineering and Technology's website, which is at iet.org, and you can learn more about the engineering profession and the various work that's being done there as well.
Oh, one more question. What are your tips for young engineers that want to follow in your footsteps? Because you've obviously done very well at a young age, and congratulations. How did you do it, and what are your tips?
Yeah, so I think the engineering profession is quite meritocratic. So there's lots of ways which are into it. There's ways which are kind of a traditional route, which is kind of where people can go to university. There's also apprenticeships, which are hugely important, and then there's also the ability of people to learn kind of vocationally. I kind of moved about a bit. I kind of started as an apprentice, and I went and did my master's and PhD at the same time. I was working at the same time, so I kind of did a few different things in tandem. But essentially, there's lots and lots of different routes that people can adopt, and I think it's just a matter of people finding the approach that is most suited to them, and in the engineering profession, whichever route that is, you'll be able to achieve kind of greatness.
Fantastic. That's a great answer. Dr. Junade Ali, once again, thank you and have a lovely day.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
How was it for you?
Yep, that was all good. Thanks.
Very happy. Okay, well, I think